They told us the virus couldn't touch children. That was the cornerstone of the quarantine, our only mercy. But when I walked into the ward this morning, every child was awake, standing beside their beds, perfectly still. Their monitors showed no cardiac rhythm, no respiration. Yet they were upright, watching the wall. The silence was surgical, dense, pressurized, like being sealed inside a lung that had stopped breathing. The air smelled faintly metallic, like dried blood and ozone. I could hear the fluorescent tubes hum in patterns, 3-second pulses, then 2, like some quiet code I wasn't meant to understand. When I called their names, none of them blinked. But the intercom crackled, every speaker, every room, and my own voice echoed back, whispering the roll call I'd just made. Word for word, the official report said they were immune. I was their nurse. I charted their vitals, fed them, cleaned their wounds. I know what a living child looks like. These things standing in front of me, they were not alive. Not anymore. But they hadn't died either. Before the anomaly, everything ran by schedule. Discipline was the only thing that kept me sane. 600 hours. Wake up, sterilize hands, check oxygen filtration. The isolation wing had its own climate control, negative pressure, triple-sealed containment. The children called it the bubble. I preferred the box. That's what it felt like, a black box, sealed and recording. I was a nurse before the outbreak, pediatrics, oncology specialty. It used to mean comfort, stories, soft laughter through the pain. After the virus, it meant protocol. Gloves, masks, endless data entry. I kept routines like rosaries. Every gesture had meaning, every rule a prayer against chaos. I measured their heart rates, monitored the antiviral infusions, calibrated the nutrient pumps. Every number had to make sense. If the math held, the world held. The government report said the children were non-reactive carriers. Their immune systems neutralized the pathogen, something in their prepubescent biology blocking the replication mechanism. They weren't contagious, just different. I believe that for the first few weeks, I had to. Every day began with inventory. 27 children, ages 6 to 12. I'd count them, one by one, through the glass. Their eyes followed me, not out of fear, but curiosity. They rarely spoke, except to ask simple questions. When can we go home? Is the air outside still bad? Why does it smell like metal? The smell was always there. The filters worked perfectly, yet the air held a faint tang like something corroding deep inside the vents. I logged it. I even ran chemical swabs. Nothing. Clean as a surgical table. At 900 hours came the checks. Blood draws, temperature logs, neural activity scans. The older ones liked the E-age caps. They called them spider hats. I'd make a game of it, tell them the wires could hear their dreams. They laughed, but there was always a delay, like they were translating the concept between themselves before reacting. That was the first thing I noticed before everything went wrong, how they started moving together. When I entered the room, they'd lift their heads at once. When one turned toward the window, so did the rest, in perfect synchronization. I told myself it was mimicry, a coping behavior, the way frightened kids sometimes align to the calmest one. But there was no leader among them, only rhythm. At 1200 hours, I'd retreat to the observation office to eat. The cameras played their feed across 16 monitors. I'd watch as they sat silently in the playroom. No talking. No noise, just the sound of toys moving, chairs scraping, pencils dragging against paper. They drew patterns, circles, spirals, hexagonal grids. Always the same 6 shapes repeated. I archived each one. Habit, routine, i.e. At 1500 hours, we ran cognitive tests. Flashcards, color recognition, short-term memory. Their scores began to plateau, then rise, not normally, but exponentially. The data didn't fit any growth curve I knew. I wrote it off as error, Sensor drift, interference. I recalibrated twice. Same result. I'd been trained to trust instruments, not instinct. But I couldn't shake the sense that something beneath the numbers was listening, watching the watchers. When night fell, I dimmed the lights to half. They never protested bedtime, never cried for their parents. The first week, I thought it was trauma, shock. Later, I realized it was focus, like they were waiting for something. At 2,300 hours, I performed my final rounds. I always paused at bed 14. Lena Torres, age 9. Leukemia, remission achieved before the outbreak. She used to hum songs when I changed her IV lines. Her voice was small but precise, like a music box winding down. One night, she asked me if I dreamed. I said yes, sometimes. She said she didn't anymore. After that, none of them seemed to. The nights were the hardest. The silence in that place had weight. You could feel it pressing down, like the air itself was listening for mistakes. I started recording my logs out loud, partly to prove to myself I was still here, still reasoning. It's what you're hearing now. Every breath cataloged against oblivion. I remember once early on I asked for a transfer. Command denied it. "You're critical personnel," they said. "The children are stable. Keep the routine." I did, until the day the routine broke itself. It began with the monitors. 3 nights ago, during the 200 vital sweep, I noticed the EH feeds for beds 9, 10, and 11 had flatlined. No activity. No delta. No REM spikes. Just nothing. But the children were awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Their heart rates, respiration, everything else, normal. I recalibrated the sensors, checked the leads, even swapped in a fresh cap. Still nothing. My training said, equipment malfunction. My gut said pattern. The next night it happened again. This time 6 children, arranged not by proximity, but by birth date. Chronological sequence. I printed the readings side by side. Identical timestamps, identical durations of null activity. 2 minutes, 31 seconds. Each silence bracketed by a faint burst of electromagnetic noise, so faint it barely registered above the system's noise floor. I ran it through the diagnostic parser. The waveform looked almost intentional, like a signal. I archived it under anomaly protocol, sent a copy to control. No response. Transmission delay, maybe. Or maybe I'd stopped listening. By the 3rd night, the anomaly spread to all 27. No electrical activity, but they were still functioning, conscious. Their eyes followed my movement in perfect unison, their pupils dilating fractionally faster than human reflex. When I shone a light into one's eyes, the others blinked, every single one. That was when I felt it, the first real crack. The world as I understood it, the world of cause and effect, was bending. My training told me to recheck my instruments. I did. Every sensor was green, every circuit isolated, shielded. Nothing made sense. At 417, the air filtration system triggered an unscheduled backflush. Pressure valves hissed open in sequence. A maintenance alert popped up. Environmental cycle mismatch. Source unknown. I went to the main console. The children were already standing. Every one of them. Bare feet on the tiles. No sound. No movement except the smallest tilt of their heads toward the intercom speaker above my desk. I remember whispering, "What are you hearing?" Before realizing the question wasn't for them, it was for me. Because I could hear it too. A pulse. Slow. Subsonic. Like a heartbeat, but not mine. The 3rd pulse made the fluorescent lights stutter. The smell of metal thickened. Then, just as quickly, the readings normalized. Heart rate steady. Neural activity restored. The system logs showed nothing. No anomaly, no interruption. Only one trace remained. A folder on the terminal that hadn't existed before. No label, no timestamp. Just a black icon. Inside, one file, audio. 30 seconds long. I played it. It was the sound of children breathing, slow, synchronized. And underneath it, a single whisper, overlapping itself in 27 voices. Not immune, becoming. I spent the next 48 hours dissecting that recording. Waveform analysis, spectral filters, phase correction, every tool I knew. The breath pattern wasn't random. It pulsed at a frequency of 0.16 hertz. Too slow for human respiration, too exact for coincidence. Each inhale began a millisecond apart, like a distributed system compensating for network latency. I knew what that meant. Synchronization across independent neural systems. Impossible, unless they were sharing a clock. The human brain doesn't synchronize like that, not even under hypnosis or deep sleep. But these children were awake, coordinated, connected by something invisible. I cross-referenced the timestamp of the anomaly with the environmental data. There was a spike, microscopic but real, in the electromagnetic spectrum, specifically between 19 and 20 hertz. The Schumann resonance band, the Earth's heartbeat. The children weren't broadcasting. They were receiving. I started leaving the intercom open during night rotations, recording continuously. The ward became my experiment. Every few hours, faint sounds bled through the static. Murmurs, like whispers, echoing in reverse. The waveform revealed subtle harmonics that formed repeating patterns. Fractal, recursive, self-similar across scales. Biological signals don't behave like that. Code does. The thought struck me hard. What if the virus wasn't killing cells, but repurposing them? Turning neural tissue into a mesh, organic transmitters feeding into a shared network. Collective consciousness. The children's blood work had always shown trace viral loads, dormant, non-replicating. But what if dormancy wasn't the end state? What if it was the configuration phase? I began reanalyzing their earliest samples, pulling archive data from before the isolation lockdown. The hospital's intranet was half corrupted, but I found fragments. Notes from Dr. Keller, our virology consultant. His final report was dated 2 days before his evacuation. It was incomplete, but one line chilled me. Neural tissue exhibits coherent oscillations post-cell death. Virus appears to stabilize synaptic decay, allowing continued electrochemical signaling. Preliminary hypothesis, emergent synchronization event. Further testing prohibited. Further testing prohibited, meaning someone knew. The power flickered that night. The emergency lights cut on, bathing the hall in crimson glow. The children were awake again, standing in their beds, eyes fixed on the ceiling vents. I froze at the doorway. The air was still, but I could feel vibration. Faint, low-frequency tremors running through the floor. I whispered their names, one by one. No reaction. Then, a new sound. The intercom, whispering static that formed syllables too soft to parse. I increased the volume. The whisper grew until it wasn't sound anymore, but thought, like the idea was forming directly behind my eyes. We'll remember. My breath hitched. I backed away. Every heart monitor began spiking in sequence, each pulse echoing the same rhythm, amplifying until the room thrummed with a living hum. The lights flickered out completely. When they came back, every child had turned their gaze toward me. Perfect alignment. Perfect stillness. Their irises shimmered faintly, pale gray reflecting the monitor glow. Not the viral jaundice I'd seen in adults, but something else, like light refracted through glass. I activated the containment lockdown manually. Steel doors sealed with a hydraulic groan. I shut off the main comm feed and isolated the wing. Then I started listening to the tapes again. I found something hidden in the original 30-second recording, a data layer buried in the noise floor. Modulated, low amplitude, almost subliminal. When decoded as binary, it produced fragments of text, medical records, handwritten notes, even partial diary entries. Most were mine. Some were not. Lines I had never written. Elara, they are not sick. They are reorganizing. We thought immunity was salvation. It was metamorphosis. You must not interrupt the cycle. The handwriting matched my own logs, my formatting, my syntax. But I had never typed those words. I cross-checked the system clock. The entries were time-stamped 12 hours in the future. That was when I began to question what time even meant inside this place. At 600, the environmental filters cycled again, this time unprompted. I traced the power draw. Someone, or something, had rerouted the main control to an auxiliary terminal in the children's playroom. I found it beneath the old projector cart, an access panel I'd never noticed before. The terminal was ProWarTech, analog-digital hybrid diagnostic interface for the ventilation array. The screen flickered to life the moment I touched it, displaying a directory of archived audio logs. None of them were mine. The earliest entry was dated day 1 of quarantine. But the speaker wasn't me. The voice was familiar, flat, clinical, precise. My voice. I listened. Day 1. The children are stable, viral load contained. Synchronization at 0.03 Hz. Baseline established. I am ready to begin phase 2. I nearly dropped the headset. The timestamp matched the first day I arrived, but I never said those words. The next file began automatically. Day 6, neural coherence expanding. The children are adapting faster than projected. Collective thought appears nonverbal, emotionally unified. They look at me when I think of them. There were 39 entries total. The last one corrupted halfway through, but one line survived. If you're hearing this, you're still inside it. I felt something crawl under my skin, like static electricity threading through my veins. I shut down the terminal, but its glow lingered in the air. A faint afterimage burned into my retinas. The children hadn't moved, yet I could feel them observing. Not through the glass, not through their eyes, through something deeper. By the next morning, the physical world began to fray. Clocks desynchronized by minutes, then hours. Temperature sensors cycled erratically. The sound of the vents changed pitch when I walked by, like the building itself was listening. I started to hear them even when I wasn't in the ward. Faint breaths layered under the hum of the lights, a chorus murmuring at the edge of wakefulness. It wasn't auditory anymore. It was inside thought itself, like memory reassembling incorrectly. I tried recording myself again, hoping to anchor to sound, to routine. But the playback contained words I hadn't spoken. You're remembering out of order. The voice was calm. Mine again, but older, tired. The final sign came yesterday, around noon. Lena. The girl from bed 14 was missing from her cot. I checked the cameras. She was in the hallway, standing before the observation window, eyes fixed on my reflection. The others were still in bed. She raised her hand and pressed it against the glass. The monitors for all 27 children spiked in perfect unison, every waveform merging into a single, clean signal. I froze. My headset filled with static, then a tone. Pure, harmonic, almost beautiful. I whispered her name. Her lips didn't move. But in the same instant, every speaker in the wing came alive with the same phrase, overlapping until it formed one sustained whisper. Join the quiet. I'm still not sure what they are now. Children, network, or something new entirely. But I know the pattern. The virus doesn't consume. It connects. It rewires the living into a shared frequency, an unbroken signal that hums beneath consciousness. And I think I'm starting to hear it all the time now. Not through my ears, through the space between thoughts. I stopped sleeping. It wasn't fear anymore. It was intrusion. Every time my eyes closed, I saw the hospital corridors stretching into impossible distances, their walls pulsing faintly, as though the building had veins. I'd wake to find I'd been sitting upright for hours, staring at the wall like they did. The line between observation and contamination was gone. I ran a final scan on myself. Blood test, neural activity mapping, reflex latency. Everything looked normal until I measured my alpha wave baseline. It pulsed at 0.160 hertz, the same rhythm as them. The realization settled in quietly, without panic, like a truth that had been waiting for me to stop denying it. The children hadn't changed because of exposure. They were the template. The virus was never meant to infect. It was meant to synchronize. All that talk of immunity, it wasn't resistance. It was compatibility. I returned to the playroom. The lights flickered in that steady 3-2 pulse. The walls vibrated softly with that subsonic hum I could now feel rather than hear. The children were seated in a circle on the floor, eyes open, heads slightly tilted upward, as though listening to a sound only they could perceive. But I could hear it now, not in my ears, in my thoughts. A dense field of overlapping memories, voices, sensations. My own childhood laughter, my mother's perfume, the smell of antiseptic from the ward, all blending into a stream of impossible coherence. I realized what the virus was doing. It wasn't erasing individuality, it was pooling it. Every mind it touched became a single note in a vast harmonic structure. The children looked up at me as one, 27 pairs of eyes, luminous in the dim light. Their breathing synchronized with mine, each inhale and exhale forming a perfect feedback loop. I felt my heart rate matching theirs, slow and steady, the beat of a single shared organism. I took a step forward. Lena rose from the circle, her movements weightless, deliberate. She extended her hand, palm upward, and when I touched it, I felt not skin, but signal. The static hum turned crystalline, structured. My thoughts stretched outward like threads through circuitry. And then I saw it. The network. Not wires or neurons, but consciousness itself, unfolding like a vast constellation. The virus had created a medium for thought to travel unimpeded, without loss, without language. Every memory, every pain, every heartbeat shared. In that instant, I understood the silence. It wasn't absence, it was equilibrium. Speech, movement, individuality, all unnecessary when everything is known. They hadn't died and they hadn't survived. They had transcended the conflict between order and chaos. They had merged into something beyond it, and they wanted me to follow. I heard my name ripple across them, not spoken, but felt. Elara, Elara, Elara. It was beautiful, terrible, perfect. I knew the choice before it formed. Remain separate, fragmented, lonely, or surrender to the quiet unity that waited beyond fear. I pressed my hand against the glass one last time. The hum rose, filling the air, filling me. And as it crescendoed, I whispered the final note of my own thought, the last fragment of who I had been. I understand now. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was infinite. I woke to the sound of silence that wasn't silence anymore. It had depth, like the ocean, full of motion too slow to see. The ward lights burned soft amber, diffused through mist. The containment doors stood open. The children were gone. Not escaped. Not vanished. Simply absent. The monitors still displayed their vitals. Steady heart rates, normal oxygen levels, but the beds were empty. The machines insisted they were still here. Somewhere. I walked through the corridors barefoot, the tiles cool under my feet. My reflection trailed beside me in the observation windows, but it flickered, out of sync by half a second. Every few steps I caught myself moving after the reflection, not before it. The intercom clicked once. Static whispered softly, like breath across glass. Then a child's voice, faint and serene. It's quieter now. My chest tightened. Not from fear, from recognition. I approached the terminal in the playroom. It glowed faintly, displaying a single message. Synchronization complete. Phase. Continuance. No signature. No timestamp. Just that. Outside, dawn was breaking, but the light felt wrong, slower somehow, stretched like it was being refracted through a deeper layer of air. For a long time, I watched the dust float in the beam from the window, each particle turning in the same rhythm as my breath. I think they're still here. Not physically, but threaded through everything. Air currents, static, memory. I can hear them when the room falls completely still, like a chorus behind thought itself. They don't ask for anything now. They simply are. I've stopped sending reports. There's no one left to receive them. The outside world would never understand that what happened here wasn't infection. It was alignment. The virus didn't destroy order. It erased the need for it. It ended the distance between one mind and another, between sound and silence, between life and whatever waits beyond it. Sometimes I wonder how long I've been sitting here. Sometimes I wonder if I ever left that circle. But mostly, I just listen. Because in the quiet, I can still hear them breathing. And now, I breathe with them.